That's on that tackle warehouse color. Gulp. That's how you catch them on that bait right there. Sweet.
Hey guys, Butch Brown here. I'm at Lake Casitas, California with the Tackle Warehouse crew. I'm going to be teaching you guys a little bit more in depth about the Deps 250, how to swim it, and how to be successful using it. I'm going to be on the water today, giving you a little bit more in depth about this bait, how I fish it, where I fish it, what kind of connections I use, a little bit about the bait, the rods and reels that I use, and the line. For those of you that don't know much about the Deps 250, this is a bait that I've had for quite a while, since day one. There's a little bit of history behind these baits. They used to be made out of foam on the inside. That was the old school way, but they found that they were inconsistent in the swimming action, so they've modified the bait to the new version, and they've had this out for probably about 5 or 6 years now, and it's a PVC injected type bait now with fixed pins. It has a rubber skin. Inside is a tuner, so when you tap it, it has a vibration to it, which they believe it attracts fish, and I'm sure it does at times. In the murky water situation, it has a clacker when you do a fast jerk at it. These are just some of the features of this bait that are pretty unique, but the best feature of all is actually it's got an all rubber body. So when the hooks hit the sides, it makes no noise. And this bait can be modified. They make a nose weight for it. They make the tape-on weights for it. They can be tuned to do a lot of different things. What I like to do basically, as soon as I get this bait, is I change out the hooks. To me, hooks make a big difference in a bait. I use the Gamakatsu round bend bronze hook, 2-0 in the front, 1-0 in the back. And the reason for that is when this bait glides, these hooks are lightweight and they tuck up underneath the bait and they don't reflect sunlight like these would do. I don't use black hooks and I don't use the silver. Now, it depends what you're fishing for and where you're at to decide what you need to do to your bait. It's up to the individual to tune his bait to fit his needs. But for me, this is money. I'm gonna have more bites and I'm gonna catch more fish than most anybody else, just because of the way it's rigged and everything. You might land a couple more fish when you hook them, but I'm gonna lose, catch, and get more bites. This color right here happens to be the mere trout. It's been very good to me. I've had it for about 2 months now from Tackle Warehouse. It has a lot of flash. I catch everything on it. I catch the striper, I catch the bass. You can't go wrong with trout colors, because if you've ever been to a hatchery and you look at the trout, there's brown colored ones, there's light green ones, there's black ones, there's all different colors. So if you have a variety of trout colors, that could help. I always leave the split ring on. I never use a clip. I just think that when you have something that is so perfect looking, why would you want to put a big clip in the front? It comes also in 4 different sizes. A 175, which I don't have with me today, which is very popular. This one here, which is a 145, and this one here, which is a 115. I don't throw a lot of little baits. You know, when I get bit, everything I think that bites my line is gonna be 10 pounds because my baits are always like 10 inches, 12 inches long. But when I take the grandkids out and I want them to catch fish, well, I give them these and they have a good time at it. And when the shad are popping in the lakes, we take the weights out. We like to throw them on the surface and twitch them, you know, similar to like a surface Rapala or something like that, you know, old school style. It's also something that like smallmouth, you know, like where I live at one of my local lakes has them. They like these smaller baits like this. And I think a guy that's fishing a tournament would be very successful with this. I've known of a few nice fish that have been caught on them. what we do is normally I fish this little 115 on 6-pound test with a spinning rod. This one here I can get away from, you know, usually about 8 to 10 pound test. And then when it comes to the 175, I like to fish anywhere from 10 to 15 pound test. And then pretty much when you get into the 250 size, I would stick with minimum 20 pound.
Another one on the mirror. Tackle Warehouse.
Once you guys get your Deps 250, we all know that it's a slow sink, okay? And it's a slow sink glide bait. But we have applications where we have to get deeper sometimes, down into 30 feet of water, or stay down in 15 feet of water. And here's a couple of things that you can do from products that you get from Tackle Warehouse. Deps makes a nose weight, and this is what the nose weight looks like. And it's designed to fit right in the slot that's underneath the chin where a bill would normally be. And you just take this weight and you can just slide it right in that slot, and it fits the contour of the bait just like that. And now you have one that'll get you down into 30 feet of water if you need to, rolling it uphill, whatever you want to do. Because to wait for the bait to sink in 30 feet of water, well, you can drink a cup of coffee and smoke a cigar and it's still not going to be on the bottom. So you need to have a modification like this in order to be able to approach those fish in the wintertime that might be deeper. Another mod is these stick-on weights, these lead weights like the Zapow here. They make a couple different sizes and they're done in grams, and a gram on this bait makes a big difference in the rate of fall. See, so it's going to sink fast with this, but if you don't want it to sink fast with that, then all you want to do is just take one of these stick-on weights and you just pull it off like that, and they're like a pearl white color, and you can just lay them right on top of your bait just like that, and you can put it in different positions if you want. So if you want it to sink a little bit more nose down, or you want it to sink level, or if you want to cut your weights with a pair of scissors so it just suspends ever so slowly, you can do that with these stick-on weights. These are some of the basic modifications that you can make on the 250 with products that you can get from Tackle Warehouse. If you guys want to kick it up to another level and go to a Butch Brown tune that I do that's a little bit more extreme, we'll be shooting that later today, and you can pick up on that some other time. I want to talk to you guys on a few points about when I fish this bait and the different seasons that I go through. Now that I've had the bait for so many years, I can pretty much apply it to a year-round process in catching fish, just by having the weight modifications or taking a weight out and making it on the surface. But the best times that I've been able to fish this bait, the most productive, are like right after the spawn is over, throughout the fall, into the hot summer months, into the fall. This bait gets bit all summer long, you know, mainly in the upper water column. As it transitions into the fall to winter, and then we start seeing some of the lakes that get trout stocks, well, that's definitely something that you're going to want to be throwing when there's a lake that has trout in it. You know, November, December, January, February, those trout are out there and that's their forage. And when you're a trophy fisherman like me and you're throwing the big bait like this, those fish get conditioned to the stock. You know, they know that when the water temperature changes and drops down into the low 70s and they start putting those trout into the lake, that they position themselves on these ambush points and places where they have fed over the years past. Trout is definitely something that makes bass grow big, and if you're targeting a lake like that has them, they're big bass in there. When the water seems to get about 63 degrees right after winter, they seem to get pretty active on the pre-spawn, and that is another good time to fish it, like at mid-depths. There are certain things that I look for at that time of year, and that's when the grass starts to grow and it gets maybe about that tall, the little stringers, then I fish a lot of flats, you know, with the bait, and I do very, very good with it. And you don't necessarily need trout colors, but they do work. The carp color is excellent, but in order to catch big giant bass, trophy bass, I think you need to match the hatch or get pretty close to it. It's definitely a bait that I would fish all year long, but if I had to pick a time when it shined more than any other time, it would be in the summer months. Before I get on the water today, I want to give you guys a couple tips on things I believe and things that I've studied over the years being a trophy bass fisherman throwing big swim baits. And one most important thing of all is my moon phase. Basically, to put it in a nutshell, if the moon is visible in the daytime, whether it's a quarter, a half, a full, whatever, I don't feel that I stand much of a chance at catching a trophy bass, because over 30 years I've kept track of the fish that I've caught, and that moon is usually not visible, period, when I'm swim baiting. Whether a drop shotter's catching fish or a spinnerbait guy's catching fish, that could be, you know, which it probably is, but I'm trophy bass fishing with the big swim bait. But there are prime times that I've noticed that my bites occur, and usually it's about an hour, within the hour of the moon rising during the day, whether it be 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, whatever. If it comes up after 9 o'clock and it's 9:30, I would have usually got my bites at 8:30 or so, and then I'm pretty much out of there. I take my pictures of my big bass and I go home. Or I'll wait and say the moon's gonna come down and disappear behind the mountains at about 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't even need to go to the lake until probably 9 o'clock and start fishing. That way I don't have to sit there and go through all that suspense of waiting for it to disappear. And that bite usually will occur within an hour after it disappears over the mountains. Those are the prime times when I get bit best on swim baits out there. And I've kept track of it for 30 years, and I've got hundreds and hundreds of double-digit bass, and it just seems to work. One other thing I need to tell you is in the winter time, when it's cold and we have like 53, 58 degree water, and even pretty much during the early spring, my bites for big bass happen between 9 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the afternoon. If you can get a moon phase in there that disappears someplace in that time zone, to me that's money. You know, I'm going to be there. And if you go by that, I think you'll be successful in Southern California and probably everywhere throwing large swim baits.
Hey guys, next bait to come out, Tackle Warehouse 250 mirror trout. What can I tell you, Doctor?
For you guys that haven't fished the glide bait that much, they don't sink that fast. But one of the best retrieves is to bring your rod up like this, and you see that bow that's in there? Just work your bait so the bait works with that action. That gives you the wide glide. It's super effective, especially in water that's got a little bit of a color to it. See how the line pulses? That's because I'm giving it maximum glide. That's definitely a must in the summer. Seems like clear water, sometimes you got to speed it up, but if a guy hasn't fished a glide much, this is the perfect retrieve to get bit. And don't expect them to yank the rod out of your hand. It doesn't happen that way. Once in a great while it does, but normally all it is just a tick. And your bait is out in nowhere land, swimming around. There's no trees, there's nothing. So if something happens to that line, it's a fish. And a lot of times they like to eat the bait coming towards you, so you feel a lot less of the bite. So no matter what, swing. Like they say, swings are free. You know, the way that I fish this bait varies throughout the year and throughout the seasons, but today, right now, we're gonna go over some of the summertime techniques. I like to fish, you know, brush lines. Normally, in the perfect condition, this is all grown over with weeds. It's a shallow sloping bank. It has a lot of brush on it. There's rocks that are out there scattered about, and it's also wind blown, which creates, you know, the bait fish to come in and feed and stuff, and just an excellent spot to fish, and you just gotta fish. When the weeds are low and the water is up, then I fish over the top. Once a summer, you know, gets into like July and August and the weeds are high, then I pretty much target the edges and the dark shadows in the afternoon. They like to hide out in that stuff. If you have a big enough pocket, pitch it in a pocket, roll it through the pocket. They'll come right out of there and eat it. And one of the main weeds that I look for is not the pond weed, which is the tall, thin one, but the milfoil type weed. It looks like a Christmas tree. If you can get that and get around where the pond weed is also, like a transition, that's where they're gonna be. I get bit really good in that stuff. In the summertime, I found that the foggy mornings, for some reason, I don't get bit as good as I do on the bright sunny mornings. They like it in the sun, they see it. There has been times in my life where the fish are following the bait all the way in and they're not eating it. And you have this grass mat that's about a foot under the surface. Well, instead of seeing them come out and following your bait, you sort of want to do the buzz bait trick to them, you know, and give it some speed. That way when it comes across their path, they got one choice. It's either hit it or don't hit it. But don't follow me to the boat, I'm tired of that. You know, you have to change things up. There's no set way or style that you can just do. You can follow the basics, which is, like I said, throwing it out and just rolling it in slow. You know, but you still have to experiment throughout your day. You have to think about what's going on. If you have this grass mat going along here and you don't get bit in it for some reason, but yet I got bit over there where that point is, where there's a transition from the weeds to the rock, then maybe pay attention to that a little bit more on another point or another area. But you just have to put your time in. It's a big bait and you just got to work at it. You can't give up. You know, you get so many bites and that's the way it is.
Tackle Warehouse, limited color, big bass. What can I tell you, Doctor?
I want to talk a little bit about the fall and my application for throwing 250s, glide baits in the fall. I like to fish flats. They could be anywhere from 10 to 3-4 feet of water, but they always seem to have a drop. I fish right where the drop is a lot. And right here, I positioned myself just above a channel that runs across here. And we're sitting in 13 feet, but I'll be throwing up in 6. But the channel itself drops off, you know, pretty abruptly. And I like to just roll that thing right off of there. Definitely one of my kind of spots that I like to fish. In this situation, the water's a little bit murky from the transition. So that's where that little tuner inside the bait comes into play. You know, it has that knock in it, has a little vibration, makes it a little bit easier for them to find. So don't get discouraged if it's a little bit on the dirty side, because they can find it, especially in this deeper water. It doesn't matter to me if I'm fishing against the wind. It doesn't matter to me if I fish with the wind. I sort of prefer to fish with the wind because I can make those longer casts, and I just position my boat in a certain way that you know, I can be in more fishy water, you know, run down those channels instead of having the short cast. You know, I know a lot of guys like short casting, and I've fished with them, but to me, when you fish a glide bait, the more line out, the better you are.
Check it out, Doctor. Bass striper. There it is, guys.
In the transition from fall to winter, I like to fish a little bit deeper breaks. Usually there's going to be something there, like a rock, could be a clump of weeds that are left over from the summer. They're going to hold fish, because what little patches of milfoil that might be left, the bait fish get in there. And if you come across the right one, the bass are usually waiting on the outside. But if you do run your bait into one of those clumps, don't just work it out, snap it out so it looks like it escapes. And that triggers a lot of bites at that time of year. Another thing that I look for, it's the coot, the mud hen. When the mud hens show up in the late fall, they start eating all the weeds. And they're diving down and they're pulling up little stringers of weeds and they eat all the little buds off of there and stuff. But when they're diving, they're spooking out all the fry, all the little baby bass, all the little bluegill, all the shad that are in the weeds, and on the outside edge of that are the largemouth.
That's how you catch big bass in Southern California, on that bait right there.
One of my favorite areas to fish in the spring, early spring, and then as spring rolls on, is before the fish actually move up to start spawning, are like these high islands, these high spots that have deep channels on each side of them, and they're offshore. Definitely one of my favorite areas to fish. You know, it has small rock on it, so they have crawdads and things like that to feed on. I let it sink out a little bit, but right now I'm just working the top of it, and then in a minute from now I'll start working the outside edge. Let it sink out a little bit more and see if they're maybe on the outside. You need to be a little quiet when you're out here doing this stuff. You know, I hate using the trolling motor when I'm making a cast, but I have no choice right now because I got to fish into the wind. But I make sure my sonar's off. I make sure everything is quiet around here. You know, no clanking, no radio, no nothing. When I approach a spot like this here, you know, I just don't roar in and start fishing it. Like when I approached this spot, I came all the way around to the outside and I come in from the back because naturally this is where I want to fish. And if you're blowing in there with a, you know, 200 horsepower motor, well, you're going to spook everything you got going.
250 mirror trout, even the smallmouth like them. See ya, Doctor.
Condition, I don't buy that word in my book because, you know, I've had this bait on my lake for over 10 years and I'm still getting giant fish on it. You know, another thing about fishing big swim baits and glides baits like this, when you're coming uphill, a lot of times if you're fishing round rock or things like that, it gets stuck in there. And probably one of the best investments you can make is a retriever. And that Tackle Warehouse has those too. That's definitely something you want to have on the boat when you have these expensive baits. But like when I'm rolling this bait, and this is coming up a vertical ridge, and you see me popping it like this, if you don't set the hook on it, you can work it out like that and keep bringing it up. And a lot of times you'll get bit when you pop it out of the rocks. And then I just let it go down, back down in there, and then I just work it up. But you know, you just don't bury the hook in it. If it's not a fish, there's no reason to swing on it unless it's by accident. But you know, when you hit those rocks, you know, or a mud bank coming uphill, sandbar, you know, just shake it like that. And most of the time that bait will come right out. And if not, just pick it up, go to the other side, shake it loose, and you'll get your bait back. You know, if it's on a tree, you're going to have to use that lure retriever. but definitely you need to get one of those. You know, you guys, you're paying big money for these baits, so you know, you're talking like 150 bucks and more. So you need to always check your knots and your line. If you're going to be working it uphill in the winter like I like to do, and the rocks and everything, you need to check your line for frays often. Don't let it go unattended, because the minute you do, you're either going to snap the bait off or you're going to hook the fish of a lifetime, and it's going to be gone. And don't just cut it off right here where the knot is and then retie. If you look up here, this is how much line I have hanging off my rod when I make a cast. So you see that curl that it makes? All of them do that from repetitious casting. Just go ahead, cut that off. Just like if you were going to tie your bait on in the morning, don't just tie it on the line that comes off the reel. Pull off like 6 feet and then start to tie it. And me, I like a Palomar. And I like my Palomar to be in a certain position, okay? It's very simple knot. It's strong. If it's tied wrong, you'll know right away. Okay? And you want to wet it before you cinch it down. That's it. Simple, simple. I don't use a clip. It's too easy to get lazy and keep hooking on a bait and not retying. This way you have to retie. And if you look real close, right here, you see where the split ring makes the splits? You want to keep the knot at about 9 o'clock, okay? Right there, you want it off to the side. It's right there. Keep your knot there, because if you tie it so it's direct, sometimes when it hits that knot, it makes the bait work sort of funny. So keep it in that position, somewhere there. Just a little tip. You can work this bait underneath the docks, and we all know that there's fish under the docks, and it's something I won't pass up. And it doesn't matter if it's winter, spring, or summer, so I'm just gonna fire this down. You can work it to where it goes under the dock, and it's all in the glide. They like to tuck up underneath the dock. I mean, I've got my GoPro out and they literally sit right underneath where you can't see them. And it's just always a good place to fish for them. So don't pass it up. If you're allowed to fish there, it's a dock, go for it. You know, this is the first day that I've been able to try this Shimano Tranx, and I really like it. I'm a Calcutta, diehard Calcutta 400 guy, but now that I'm throwing this reel around, I might be changing. I really like it. It's super smooth. I feel no bind in the action of the bait when it turns, because some reels you feel that. The gear ratio seems to be perfect. The spool has a lot of line on it at the end of a long cast. It is just a touch faster than the other reel, but I could see where that comes into play, especially on the burn. I really like them a lot. I'm definitely something I'm going to be looking into right here. The handle's perfect. You know, handle was a big deal to me. You see, I replaced all the handles on my other reels, but this one's in there, and the drag is nice and smooth. Yeah, definitely a nice reel for swim baiting, whether it's going to be the glide bait or a wake bait, you know, wake and crank, whatever you want to call them, swim baits. Feels good. You know, when I look at a reel, I look at how smooth it is, the whole cast. So if the bait is changing from one direction to the other and I feel a bind in the handle, it's a distraction. But this one is just as smooth as silk no matter what I do at any speed, and I really like it a lot. When it comes to the reels, for me, when I'm throwing a big bait like this, I like something in a 400 size, There's many of them out on the market right now, but you want to get yourself a 400 size if you're going to be throwing 20-pound test. And I wouldn't go less than a 300 size reel if you're going to be into the 15 to maybe 18-pound class. You want something that has somewhere between a 5.1 gear ratio up to maybe a 6. Too fast makes you fish too fast, but yet you can always adjust when you have something in that range right there. You pretty much have to have a specialty rod. You can't just pick any rod up. It needs to be a swim bait rod. There's plenty of them out there. 8-foot, heavy action, depending on the bait. This is 6.5 ounces. Most baits seem to be in that realm. You'll know if you've got the wrong rod for the bait, because when you throw it, if the rod is too soft, the bait will cartwheel through the air. If you have the right rod and you throw it, the bait's going to lay out there just nice and smooth with little bit of effort, you know. And it's a pendulum motion that you use when you cast. You don't snap your cast. It's not flipping or anything. One of the features that I look for in a rod is the fact that from the reel to the edge of my elbow just seems to be a sweet spot for me. It's always been that way. That's what I look for, other than it's a heavier power rod. But it's up to you to decide what size baits you're going to fish, because not everybody throws 10-inch baits. Some throw the 8-inch and a little bit lighter. So then you want to scale down a little bit from there, go to like a medium heavy kind of rod. As far as line is concerned, I do fish 20-pound fluorocarbon. And one of the main reasons for that is I'm making long casts, but it has very little stretch, it's very sensitive, and it'll sink with the bait. So if you throw a bait and you let it sink to the bottom on a long cast, it doesn't take long for that line to get direct, versus if you have a copolymer or a monofilament, it tends to float in the water column, and then you have to bring the bait a quarter of the way in to get that to level out. So to me, it's very important to be throwing the fluorocarbon. It lasts a long time on the reel. It doesn't have a memory on it. And one of the best fluoros that I've ever used, and I won't switch for anybody, is the Seagar Abrazex. I don't break it. I land my big fish. You can watch my videos and see how hard I pull on them. So I have very, very few failures when it comes to that. The maintenance part of this bait that's pretty important in my opinion. This bait has a little hole in the back, okay? And this whole jacket fills up with water when you're fishing. And then there's a little vent right in here, okay? And water shoots through there when you're working the bait. And that's how it's supposed to be. But when you're done fishing, what you need to do, because this is a clear finish, and like a plastic worm, when it's in the water for a couple of days, it gets that milky color. Well, this bait is pretty much no different. You'll see a little bit of it form here if you don't dry it out properly. So as far as maintenance is concerned, you know, you just want to squeeze all that water out like a little rubber ducky toy in the bathtub, and then shake it all out. And then my favorite way of doing it is on the way home is I throw it on the dash and turn the heater on. But you know, do what you can do. You can use a blow dryer. You can just keep it in a nice warm spot, hang it. You know, don't lay it down, because then the tail will slightly get bent, and then you'll wonder why the bait's not swimming right. If that does occur, which it happens, you know, sometimes it's even laying in the boat like that. You can take a heat gun, you can throw it on your dash, turn the heater on, and it'll go right back where it's supposed to be, and off you go fishing again. You know, but storage, it's not a cheap bait, so you need to take care of it. You know, you just can't just throw it in a tackle box with a bunch of plastic worms, because if it touches a plastic worm, the plastic from the plastic worm will actually make this swell up, sort of like oil on a bushing on a car or something. It's not good. You don't want to use any scent on these at all, because the oils get secreted inside and it stiffens up the rubber. But definitely a game changer in my world. And when I first got this bait, it was in the springtime, and I caught fish on it right away. but I had to go through the different hooks to get the fish to stick. But it was the goose that laid the golden egg for my summertime fishing. You know, it was the hottest, brightest days of the year that I couldn't get bit on my HUD. I couldn't get bit on half the stuff I had. It was just dead still. But when I put the 250 on, it just like, that was it. I have all my baits throughout the year that I'm gonna be needing to catch trophy-sized bass. You know, I did my homework, and that's what I believe in. I know we've talked about a lot of things, but one of the most important tips I can give you right now is don't overfish the bait. A lot of guys like to reel too fast. This is a glide bait, okay? So the more slack you have in the line and the slower you go, the wider and the more natural the bait's gonna look. If you wind too fast, then it's gonna look more like a crankbait. It's a glide bait, there's no bill on it. This thing depends on you to make it go like this out there. That's one good tip I can give you. Make sure you have like a loop in your line and watch that loop and watch your bait. Go to the back of the lake, throw it out in some clear water where you can see it, and look at it and see how it swims so it looks more natural. That's probably one of the best tips you can have. You know, look at the bait, and then that way when you can't see the bait, you know exactly what it's doing. Well, I hope you learned something today about the glide bait and how to fish it. Remember, catch and release, and if you have any comments or questions, please leave them below, and I'll get back and answer them. See ya.